Hi, my name is Karen Holmes. I'm the founder and director of the World Peace Organization for the One World Government. Well, the last few days have been a real shock for a lot of people with the Supreme Court announcing that they're basically overturning Roe v. Wade. And people had been protesting for a long time, and they knew it was coming, and they didn't know what to do with it, and kind of got into a crisis situation when the reality is that so many people are losing their rights. Okay, so today I wanted to look at kind of an overview idea of the situation, and because the next level of this is that there's going to be let's say a culture war. Years ago I got a prophecy that people are going to be very angry at Christians. And now is the time when the prophecy basically is coming true, that the anger against the Christians is going to start growing because what they're doing is they're looking at, let's say, the morality of, let's say, it's wrong to kill babies, but they're dictating, they're interfering in the lives of other people. Let's say, what you want in a society is when everybody is responsible for their own choices. You want people to be let's say, the captain of their own ships and not interfering. When our relationship with our Creator is that we all have a purpose in life, and everyone has to be able to address our purposes in life. We have a group purpose, an individual purpose, and we have a racial purpose. Our racial purpose is, you could say, what comes down through generation after generation, and I can go into that in other videos. In fact, I probably have. But we have our individual purpose and our unalienable rights that we have. Let's say we're born with an idea, with a blueprint in our heart for what we want to create in our lives, and when other people are interfering, then that blueprint, it's like interfering with, that's why people die, basically, is because we have our purpose in life and we're programmed a certain way. And when other people interfere in our lives, that makes it very hard for us to overcome the oppression of it. It becomes oppressive. In the past, there were people who were born into certain circumstances where there was let's say, a karmic debt. But now there's information on how to overcome karma, and your purpose was to come back and undo the damage you've done. But now all we have to do is, now that there's like a global idea, we can do what's in everyone's best interest. And then what that does is it allows us all to move forward. Okay, it's like everybody is in step with each other, not necessarily all doing the same thing, but allowing people to fulfill their purpose in life. Our founding fathers in the United States said, we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. But those are to be able to create the life that you want without interference, to be able to be treated fairly and equally, and to have a voice in our government. So, and then there's other ones like the right to live in a pristine environment, that nobody has the right to kind of like destroy the environment, because it's a global idea. It's a global idea. So the idea has been introduced trying to stop that idea of rights. We have the right, when you say, I have the right to dictate terms to you, and you don't have any right to say this. This is where you could say the Supreme Court is. They're saying, what we say, we have absolute power to interfere in your life, then that's not something that is coming from God, our Creator. So when I'm talking about religion, I'm talking about an interpretation of universal law, a cultural interpretation of universal law. Spirituality, I'm talking about understanding the Creator, the overview idea of it, that applies to all the religions. Okay, so with Roe v. Wade, the shock of it is that it's interfering in people's lives. It's a small group of people telling everyone else that they're going to interfere in their lives. There has been, let's say, a spiraling down effect for a long time. I'm going to say that the first step, it's been going on individual basis all along, but in the United States here, which were like a melting pot, were the overview idea. The United States, the belief structure was, well, we're a democratic country. We've achieved what other countries have never done. We're the best country in the world. We're just the overview country. And we had, what made our country great was not Donald Trump. It was our Constitution, because it guaranteed rights to people. But then what had been left out was this idea, this misunderstanding about universal law, that we are all part of the universe, we're all part of the world. How can you get rid of globalism when we're part of the world? You know, we depend on Walmart is bringing goods. We're importing goods all the time from China. It used to be Japan, and now it's China and Korea and all these countries we have. You know, how can you separate yourself out from a world? We rely, in the United States, we rely on food coming from Mexico. If we had to grow our own food, it would be very hard we'd run out of apples, we'd run out of the food, because what happens is there's this flow of food that comes from there, and then flow coming back, there's always this flow, this trade thing going on. So even if we're at war with a country, if we're basically kind of in a war with Russia because we're supporting Ukraine, Russian oil is still coming in. So economically and politically are two different things. When they clash a lot, it causes problems. It causes supply chain issues and pandemics and everything. You know, so we can't stop globalism because it's there. Putting a wall around us doesn't work. But what has happened is that the Iraq War started this because what happened was we collapsed our power base. And I've talked about how if you don't stand on those 7 principles of equality, equality is oppressive and counters oppression and wars, okay? Freedom, a genocide is because people are denied their unalienable rights. So what we're seeing is all these ripples of effects that have gone out from the Iraq War. The collapse of the United States power base. And some people are looking at it and saying, we're still the most powerful nation on the planet. And other people are saying, we've collapsed our power base. You know, they don't respect us anymore as a democratic country. We went over there and interfered in the rights of the Iraqi people to live their life without interference. You know, so you can say you can justify a war when you're defending yourself, like you can justify standing up and defending Ukraine against the oppression of Russia, except you can't anymore because the plan for the international government was introduced. So let's say that when we collapsed our power base, there was the rise of authoritarianism, but which actually was going down. And then going along with that idea was that, well, we're a democratic country and we have the right to do this, and we don't. And then the plan for the international government was our choice to go up. But not everybody saw the potential of it. So we've got all of these forces pulling different directions. But what has happened then is that, let's say that people are trying to erase the idea of the international government and the rights of people. But how can you erase the rights of people when they're coming from God and people are rising up? And this is where we're seeing so many people like shooting other people because they feel their life has been interfered with. We're dealing with a global genocide now with the idea of the loss of rights. But in the Christian church, there's also this misunderstanding about God. What is your definition of God? Is it a Christian God and we are the chosen people, and therefore we have the right to dictate terms to everybody else? Or is it the idea of spirituality where everybody, God sees everybody as equal? So we're looking at these ideas that are based on misunderstandings, based on lies, based on illusion, based on power games. If you know about the Catholic Church and the history of it and all the games that were played and the fact that there were even 2 popes for a while and all these things, after a while an idea will get kind of corrupted because of all this spiraling down. If you are the Pope and you can tell people what to do, then absolute power corrupts absolutely. Okay, but what happens if you have the beginning of a new idea, that the old idea reaches the point of where it ends? This is where I've said before that Donald Trump was the last president of the United States, the last cycle of the United States. He was there. Pope Benedict XVI was the in extremis Pope, and Donald Trump is the in extremis president of the United States. And we're seeing all these extremist ideas reaching their ultimate conclusion. So the idea, when the pendulum swings out, there's a flip-flop effect, and that is, to bring the pendulum back, there has to be this flip-flop effect, an illusion, and some people will still keep going out. So let's say that if you're in a group of people, somebody will say, this is not right. There's a mob scene and somebody says, this is not right, and then they go home. Then it starts to collapse the power base. When you have a whole bunch of people together, what happens is people are still kind of like swinging it out. We had the Republicans, the real Republicans from the traditional idea, and then you had the pendulum keep swinging out with the Trump supporters, who are talking about the other guys being Republicans in name only, and then it keeps on swinging the pendulum further and further out. But then individuals keep flipping over. An example of this is my first year of introducing the plan. I went for the international government in my town. There was the local festival, and I had a booth. And I was introducing a plan for world peace. This was in 2003, just about 3 or 4 months after the Iraq War started. And I was wedged between a Christian booth and the Republican Party booth. And people who were trying to come and say, we like your plan, we want to hear about your plan for world peace because we're right in the middle of a war. And there were people who actually felt the pressure of the Catholics or the Christians on one side, who were basically, I don't want anything to do with you. You're a traitor to our country. We have to stand up and we have to fight because we have to be patriotic. And all these equated ideas came together, and the world peace idea was squeezed right between there. And people called me traitor. People called me unpatriotic and un-American because I was a globalist, so to speak. A plan for world peace in a time of war. And then what happened is the next year, the people who were basically accusing me of being a terrorist, some of them came back and said, I'm sorry, because now I understand what happened. There was a flip-flop idea. There was this flip-flop. They were no longer on this drive to push things further and further out. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start to see the plan for world peace has to address all these issues about all of these things that are pushing the pendulum further out. When you come up with a plan too, you will, and that is based on your talents and gifts, just like I have. When you come up with a plan, you will be facing the same opposition that I have faced, but then your plan has to address how to bring all these people further, who are pushing the pendulum further out, then basically, then you'll bring people back to that center point, so everybody's moving forward together in our progress. Okay, so as people are going out, then you have this counter idea, and like, let's say the Bidens are going after, the Biden administration and Congress now is trying to counter the effects that are going out here. But then in the middle, your plan, like just like mine, has to address all of these issues about it. So the Catholic Church, let's say, is my job is to deal with the church, the Catholic Church, related to abortion. And I'm going to tell you that I did a book with Pope John Paul II, who basically was pro-life. He didn't believe it. When he came back and talked to me, he said that he had made a mistake, that the mistake that he had made was that it was interfering with the people's right, unalienable right to live their life without interference. Okay, so what happens if your right to live your life without interference is that you have the right to interfere in other people's life? What happens if you have a plot? So you have a plan that benefits everyone and a plot that benefits no one. So you see what I'm talking about. So now, the first idea was the Iraq War, and that set a group of people like the Patriots and the people who are pro-America, the equated ideas associated with that, pro-America. Well, leaving the Muslims out and leaving all these other people out, and we're Americans and we have the right to tell everybody else what to do. We don't. Okay, then it was, let's say, the Republicans who supported the war against the people who are going, the Iraqi people have the right to choose their own government. We don't have the right to move in. There are no weapons of mass destruction. Okay, so that's what collapsed the U.S. power base. Attacking innocent people collapses your power base. Okay, then the idea of the international government in 2003 came out, like, to begin with, and it was just small. And everybody that I knew thought, this is great. And then what happened is I started to hit resistance, and then all of a sudden the resistance keeps on growing because there's this group of people who are going out this way. Some they're becoming extremists. So then we had, let's say, the rise of authoritarianism to counter the idea, well, we can't let this idea happen. The Iraq War was revenge, so we're dealing with revenge. We're dealing with how revenge works. We're dealing with racism. We're dealing with people taking away their rights. Now what we're dealing with, we're going to deal with, is people legally standing up and contesting those decisions by the Supreme Court. They're going to test them and they're going to look at it. If the Supreme Court looks at only information that is in that one document, that one argument, and then applies it on a bigger scale to take advantage of the situation. Now, like, let's say if we can overturn Roe v. Wade, why can't we overturn contraception and same-sex marriage and this and this and this, where we can justify taking away the rights of the people? And then you've got people saying, yeah, that's great. So you see what we're talking about now. So the next thing is, so then we had human rights. So I introduced the letter to the Supreme Court, and then you had people who were going, well, we're just going to call them human rights. And therefore, it's kind of like, well, I don't have to think of you as being human. They can kind of get around things. They can equate ideas. You know, like this, the Constitution gives us the right to constitutionally justify denying other people their unalienable rights. That's where the Constitution is abuse of power. It gives people the right to constitutionally justify abuse of power. Because you cannot argue that. So the Constitution can pull our country higher by supporting rights and not human rights, unalienable rights in our Creator. But then we have to look at, we're going in circles again, we have to look at God, the definition of God, And like religion, does one religion have the right to tell every other religion, because we're the chosen people? Does everyone have the right to do that? No, it doesn't. So we introduce the faith of the pure ray, which brings all the 7 major religions together to teach people how to create the life they want, how to fulfill their purpose in life. Bringing together all of these ideas into one body of knowledge. Okay? So the Constitution, we are looking at the Constitution, a use of power, abuse of power, and let's say upholding laws, because it took a long time for slavery to be overturned, didn't it? Okay, we had a Constitution, but then it had to be amended to avoid us going down again. We're looking now at religion, and we're looking at Catholicism, and we're looking at the Pope John Paul II, and what he did. So I introduced the faith of the pure ray. I introduced the plan for the international government. I introduced the letter to the Supreme Court and the government proposals and everything. And then the letter to the Supreme Court, which was, then they're trying to erase that because we really don't want to do that. We have our own agenda. We don't like this, so we're going to have to erase it. And universal law there's court buildings around the country that on the lintel part above that say, we do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So this has been introduced before, but now what's happening is people have evolved to the point where there's this body of knowledge, body of laws that have prevented this. We have to deal with the Iraq War, and that is the idea of taking away the unalienable rights. When you do unto others and we abused our power, George W. Bush abused his power by invading a sovereign country. We have to deal with the exit strategy for Iraq. We have to deal with the Catholic Church in America. And let's say my job as in my organization, the Catholic Church in America, deals with the idea of the Crusades, terrorism that came as a result of the Crusades, and abuse by the Catholic priests, sexual abuse of the boys in the church, because that was taking away the rights of the people too, and they go against the 7 deadly sins. So we're looking at all of these ideas about all this. So there are going to be people who are questioning or standing up and testing this by getting arrested and things like that, which is what Rosa Parks did. She got arrested and she questioned this idea. There was a flip-flop idea where she was either a woman or she was black. If she was riding the bus and she was a black person, she had to give the seat to the man. If she was a woman, then the man, she had the right to sit in that seat. So there's this flip-flop idea where people will be looking at things and that will flip the pendulum back this way. Those people who stand up and come up with ideas and being supported by a group of people. The flip-flop idea is we're going to see happening over and over again. The Iraq War, was it a legal war? Why is it? So there's this big body of knowledge now about the exit strategy for Iraq with the flip-flop idea. Is this going to be something where George Bush is going to come up with a plan or support the idea of the exit strategy for Iraq to leave the world in a place where disputes between nations are settled in court rather than the battlefield? That's the first idea. How about Ukraine? If Russia is coming and interfering in the world now, moving in like they took over the satellite nations, and Ukraine is standing up and it's bulldozing Ukraine down, and this is going to fight for a long time, do we have to wage a war against Putin? Or is he going to come and a Cuban Missile Crisis, or are we going to stand on the idea that, mankind has evolved to the point where we don't have to wage war anymore, that there's this flip-flop idea that we can actually support the idea that George Bush can defend everybody by taking that dispute in Iraq and looking at revenge and how it works and why it doesn't work, the government proposal, that body of knowledge, and then everybody is in lockstep moving forward, because nobody really wants to die in a war. Nobody wants to die in the Space Force out there in space. You break apart those things, you've got all the mess up in space, and it's going to take forever. It'll destroy those satellites. So all of these problems have to be addressed. So the first time we get lockstep is, we don't want, in the United States, we don't want the idea that we will fight them over there, so we don't have to fight them here, because now the war is going to be coming to the United States, and we are going to be fighting everyone if we don't stand up and do that flip-flop idea that we don't have to do that. We can undo the damage we've done as our country by allowing everybody. We start in the idea of my books, where we start in the catalog, and I'll go into that later, about how we start to evolve out of that idea by taking disputes to court, which is what happens between states in the United States. If all the countries are treated like the states in the United States, we can go to court and the rest of us can just go on and live our life without interference, which is basically what the criteria is, isn't it, for living our life without interference. So let's always look for the idea that God intended us to live our life without interference, to be treated fairly and equally, no racism, nobody's above anybody else, and to be able to create our life. Okay? So, and then, among others, we have the right to a pristine environment, because nobody has a right to pollute. If your next door neighbor is polluting, how are you going to solve that problem? But once you stand up and protest, nobody will hear you unless you have a plan that benefits everyone. Okay, so the first idea, pollution, the overview idea, is the creation of the international government, because then we don't have to solve the problem. We can just allow the international government and all those great experts on it in the world who don't have any voice. We can get experts on pollution. People someplace have come up with a solution, and they can work on within their country, coming up with ideas, and then the international government can advise. The experts on pollution and environment will advise the branches, and it isn't a trickle down idea, it's a trickle up idea, and we'll have a voice in our government. Okay, see how this works? It's not hard. So you'll find that this first body of knowledge that we're talking about is going to allow everybody to function on a higher level. But we're going to have to unravel these ideas that have gotten us into trouble, like one religion is more important than the other. It isn't, because God, the creator of us all, is let's say Jesus. If you got the religions together, what would happen if you got Jesus, Moses, Gautama Buddha, Prophet Muhammad, Rama, Confucius, and Lao Tzu together in a room? What do you think they would do? Wage war on each other? I don't think so. I think they would each sit down and they would talk about the principles that they have, and how each one of them taught the principles from their own perspective on how to create the life you want. So that's what it is. We're looking at religion not with the idea that Jesus is going to beat up Muhammad and get into a war with him. They're going to just work together because they all basically introduced God in some way, came to them and introduced this new idea that allowed it to people to be able to create their life. And now what we're doing with the Faith of the Puree is bringing them all together, putting them in one room, one building, and they're each going to have classrooms, and they're going to teach the principles of the religion on how to create the life you want. Because Jesus taught the principles of creativity, Moses taught the principles of productivity, Gautama Buddha taught the principles of prosperity. Hey, and just think about it sometime. Read the Faith of the Puree. Prophet Muhammad taught the principles of equality. Rama taught the principles of security. Confucius taught the principles of capacity, and Lao Tzu taught the principles of tolerance. So you put all these. So my drawing here. So let's say this. If we take this drawing here, if we have equality here, we have Prophet Muhammad standing right here teaching the principles of equality. We have each one of these has taught each of these ideas: compassion, capacity, liberty, freedom. So rather than go through this, I have to keep watching this myself and learning and figuring this out, because I'm not an expert on anything. Maybe you can figure that out too. You figure out too how it works. They go around in a circle right like this. Okay? So this is a circle. So Muhammad taught the principles of equality, liberty, freedom, compassion, abundance, capacity. And so religion is not actually a reason to wage war. It's a religion to create a sense of balance again. So there we have it. We're going to look at Catholicism and Jesus teaching the principles of creativity. These are the principles of universal law, but then each of the religions teaches the one idea of the planning process. Okay, so that's where we are right now. The next one is, so there was the Iraq War, the rise of authoritarianism, because of taking where we collapsed our power base, but some people still think it's going forward. Then the idea of the international government came in, and people tried to erase it. But how can you erase something where we live in a global society? Is this where we're going to have an emperor again who basically has the power of life and death over people, or dictators? No, not when we have a plan for an international government based on the principles of the cooperation of nature, and the economic principles of cooperation of nature, and the political principles of the U.S. Constitution. Two proven concepts. Okay, and then human rights as opposed to unalienable rights. You might be able to justify getting rid of human rights. You could wage a war when human rights, well, we have to sacrifice our rights so that we can defend our country. That doesn't work. Why do we have to do that? Why does anybody have to sacrifice their life so that they can defend their country? How about if the world leaders sit down together and create the plan help to set up the plan for the international government? That's our conference in Europe. Okay, and then religion now, by taking away the rights of the people, just that misunderstanding about human rights and unalienable rights. So one, you're constitutionally justifying removing away people's rights. And the other one, you better sit down and come up with a better plan that allows people to be able to fulfill their purpose in life, because otherwise you're fighting God. Okay? One, you're fighting God, and one, you're fighting Russia. Okay? That's equated ideas. Okay? Then the other one is religion, and that is a misunderstanding in religion that allows you to religiously justify taking away the rights of the people. All right, so that's what I wanted to talk about today. So I ask that you like, share, and subscribe. Okay? but most of all share because this is important, especially if you know somebody who can help flip-flop ideas. Instead of going the long way, we can go the short way, and we can bring that center, those pieces back together again so everybody's in lockstep. So that's where we're going to go from now. So I ask that you like, share, and subscribe. Thanks.